Thank you, brother, for what you shared and are sharing. And this week you mentioned, because you mentioned MS several times when we were on our call. If you want to share, you mentioned about your recent visit to the doctor and what he said. Do you want to talk about that?
All praises due to Allah. Yes, sir. I can only, and I always started, I'll preference it like this. I can only say that, tell you the beauty of Allah who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad.
Mm,
I have, I have no doubt that he is indeed God, because when I was diagnosed in 2016 with multiple sclerosis, I had it 3 years before the diagnosis. So I was ignoring signs, and that's why I'm so open and animate about telling people about multiple sclerosis, because Black men, we have a tendency not to want to go to the doctor when we're feeling pains or some lump came up on our body, so we're ignoring it. It's nothing, it'll go away. Or if I just drink this can of beer, maybe I can drink it out of my system. So we grew up in that society. And so I ignored, like any other Black man, the muscle spasticity, as it's called, the twitching of the muscles, and I ignored it. I thought it was a torn. I pulled a muscle or something, and I ignored or when I was having dizzy spells or my equilibrium was thrown off. I ignored all of that, and so, but years later, I'm sorry. At the beginning, my doctor told me, he said that in Black men and Hispanic men, it has an aggressive, MS is aggressive, and it breaks down the body. And he said, so he said, at the rate you're going, you have 2 lesions on your spine and 4 lesions on your brain. He said, at the rate you're going, he said, in 10 years, you will be in a wheelchair. Well, by the grace of Allah, this is the 10th year, and I'm not in a wheelchair. He came back to me a few years later. He said, man, he said, the way things are going, man, he's like, man, you are beating this thing by leaps and bounds. So 3 weeks ago, we had a televisit because he's retiring. And he wanted me to know he was retiring. He had a little wiggle to his voice, and I thought he was emotional about retiring. But it turns out, he goes, I just got back your brain scanned. Anyone with MS knows that once a year you get a brain and spine scan. And so he said, I just got back the results of your brain scan and your spinal scan. And he said, man, it is nothing short of a medical miracle that you have had multiple sclerosis for a total of 10 years, and you have not progressed. He said, that is unheard of. He said, so it is a miracle that you have no lesions on your brain or your spine. He said, he says, so I just want you to know that worst case scenario, at the rate you're going, by the time you're 75, you'll be walking with a cane. And all I could think was, all praises to, I wanted to scream on the phone, but all praises due to Allah. There's no cure for MS. But I remember I was sitting in a van with Brother Nuri. And Brother Nuri and he was on his way to a venue. We were taking him around town in San Antonio. And he said to me, he said, yeah, it's great that you got one of the leading neurologists in the world. He said, but you got the greatest doctor in the world, Master Farad Muhammad. So you have nothing to worry about, brother. And so I took that very serious. And so I'm bearing witness today, 10 years later, that I'm walking, talking. I can see. I was going blind at one point in time in my sojourn, but I'm walking, talking, and I can see, I can swallow. All those things are important. because I was having an issue with all of them. In fact, they were sending me to speech therapy because I had a problem swallowing. And, sometimes when I'm flaring up, if I'm swallowing things, I can't suck out of a straw sometimes because it immediately goes down the esophagus and I begin to choke. But by the grace of Allah, I'm doing great.